Especially in big cities like LA, New York, Chicago, families are much more nuclear. You're supposed to be taken care of. You're not supposed to be like up and back at work again.
That's what's complicated about it, is that we're in a culture where women, we want to work. You're directing, you're acting, you're doing a ton of things. We're doing our podcast. My family lives in Spain. And my brother is like, he's like, what? I have my siesta, I have my wine,
exactly.
I have my family. What else do I want? He's like, where are you running all the time? What are you trying to find? There's moments where I'm like, that's a really, really good...
No, but it's true.
Being a mom is the toughest job there is, and it doesn't come with instructions. So it's okay if you don't have all the answers. We'll figure it out together. This is Mom Brain with Hilaria Baldwin and Daphne Vause.
Hey, it's Laura Prepon talking to you guys on Mom Brain. Cool. I haven't done a podcast in a minute. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
You wrapped the final season.
Yeah, we wrapped like a week and a half ago. 7 years. It's crazy. But it's time. It was like absolutely incredible. And I directed 3 of them, which was great. My first episode I directed, I was pregnant. Which was crazy because in that particular episode, I was like taken hostage and we were wrapped. Taylor and I were wrapped naked in a shower curtain, hands and feet literally bound behind our back. Like we had to be lowered to the ground by 2 guys before each take. And then they put duct tape over our mouths. And I had to do like, I think there were 11 different scenes like that. And that was my first episode I ever directed. And I was pregnant.
Were you sucking in? Like what were you doing?
Well, what's funny is...
How do you hide when you're naked and duct tape and wrapped?
It was brutal. I didn't find out I was pregnant until literally... We wrapped the episode and I was because you're just like running on adrenaline when you're, directing and everything. And then the day after we wrapped, I was the most tired I'd ever been in my life. I was dead, like literally dead. Like, and I said, what am I going to do? This is crazy. Like, and then I actually thought I was getting a flu or something. And then I found out I was pregnant. And then I was freaked out because I was like, oh my God, I did all these stunts and we were crying and screaming and like attacking people. What if she heard it? Like I was so freaked out.
She didn't have ears at that point.
It was okay. No, I was just so terrified because you hear about all these things about, and it was my first one. So you hear all these things like your baby, like here, who knows?
Feels all your emotions.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's so funny because I likewise went to my doctor, my OB-GYN, because I was like, I just don't feel good with my first, I thought I was getting a flu. And she was like, she of course, every time you go into any doctor's office as a woman, they're like, pee on this. You're like, okay, great.
You always have to pee on something.
You gotta pee on something.
Yeah.
She was like, wow, your hormones are really high. Let's just take a look at you. And we heard a heartbeat.
No.
Oh my God. No, it was so crazy.
I wish I was like you guys. I know
was
right away.
Unaware.
I literally the next
so
day,
cool.
the next day, I'm like, I'm pregnant. I can tell.
Yeah,
Before a pregnancy test, I can tell.
Wow.
Oh, and you know what? That makes the whole pregnancy really, really, really long.
Yeah,
like if you could miss the first 3 months, you're like, great, didn't know. And then you only have 2 more trimesters. It's great.
Yeah, it's insane. It's crazy. Because the first trimester obviously is the most, brutal.
Brutal. And that's why it's funny. And I guess it's just in retrospect because it was my first. I didn't know what I was feeling. And maybe I was just eating a lot more bagels than I normally eat that month. So I was okay. It's also one of those things where it's like we hadn't been trying or something. I didn't anticipate it.
Yeah.
But Daphne, you also weren't like, how did that happen? Right?
For sure not. I know. Especially because almost inevitably my babies happen after like a weekend of total craziness, like debauchery and like weddings or parties or friends are over, whatever. And again, I think it's so interesting, and I obviously have not studied this. I don't know what I speak, but I am convinced that part of the process is your body getting sort of like the more relaxed and happy and in your space your body is, the more receptive it is to whatever's going on.
Wants a happy home.
True.
The baby
you
wants
have
a happy
to be relaxed.
Yeah.
I talked, but it's funny because like I have a bunch of friends that are thinking about having kids or trying really hard to have kids, and one of them in particular did a ton of failed IVF cycles, and her doctor finally just said, you need to just take a break.
Yeah.
You need to take a break. You need to relax. You need to go just be with your husband and just be a couple again. And she has 1 ovary because of an illness she had when she was in her 20s. But then she got pregnant naturally with 1 ovary after 3 failed IVF cycles.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's like the miracle baby because at the time she was, I think, 45.
Wow.
So naturally got pregnant. But she stopped white knuckling everything and then just relaxed and was like, you know what? I'm just going to relax and de-stress before we think about trying another cycle. And she got pregnant.
I'm sure there are lots of people listening to the podcast who have gone through their version of dealing with fertility, dealing with miscarriage.
Right.
And in the process, it can feel so defeating and so
Right.
frustrating. And then you hear stories like that. And like, on the one hand, that gives you hope because
Right.
I do think that it's like we started having sex for fun again and then it worked.
Exactly.
But I also think that one of the things that we talk a lot about here is like fertility practices that do intervene in non-invasive ways or that do just bolster the soil a little bit. Like we talked about acupuncture. Well, I think at some
Right.
point we should have a diet episode with like a nutritionist who specializes in fertility because there's really interesting
Oh, you
science
totally should.
around like
Yeah.
what you should eat to make sure that your body's ready for that.
Fully.
I follow a bunch of women who, again, this is how Mom Brain goes. Like you literally just follow the random train. The train
We
goes
have no
where-
plan. There's no plan, no preparation, no plan.
But
That's cool.
I had lunch with a girlfriend this week, and she lives in London, and she was telling me about what their sort of system does is they have something called postnatal doulas.
Mm-hmm.
So these are women who come to your house for the 4th trimester, which is the 40 days after you give
Right.
birth. And they're there really to take care of mom. So they cook for
Exactly.
you, they belly wrap. They have something called like Mayan belly wrapping, where it's basically a really fancy like braided linen wrap around your
Right.
stomach, which is kind of like a customized girdle that, brings everything back together. They do this amazing lymphatic massage with Ayurvedic
Right.
herbs, all this stuff. Yoni steaming. Get Gwyneth, come on our show and talk about yoni steaming.
That's amazing.
But it's like it was making me think all these things that are sort of traditional wisdom that women knew about or that culturally we knew about
Right.
that we have lost sight of
We've
sometimes.
gotten so far away, especially in this
we've
culture.
gotten really far away.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. I mean, also, I think it's also a thing of, our culture is a very productive based culture. And, I was back at work at 6 weeks and I feel like by the time my daughter was 4 months old, I was directing. So again, my second episode. So I think that it's kind of this badge of honor that we wear and it's weird. I think it's definitely something that has to do with this culture. You hear about different things like you were just saying called, in other cultures lying in where the women literally just the mother relaxes and it does take a village and literally her family comes in and takes care of her and the baby. And I definitely think it's something, especially in big cities like LA, New York, Chicago, families are much more nuclear and we don't live with our in-laws and, it's kind of rare when that happens. And I find that lying in period doesn't really happen much. I don't know one friend who had a lying in period.
No, those two words have never gone together.
Exactly.
Like,
I don't
what?
know one friend who literally was like, oh, my 4th trimester, I just relaxed and was fed bone broth and my
Felt
baby was brought to
fortified.
me and I just laid around and relaxed and regenerated. But that's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to rest and recuperate and your immune system is compromised because you just grew, this beautiful baby. And, you're supposed to be taken care of. You're not supposed to be like up and back at work again.
But I think that's what's complicated about it, is that we're in a culture where women, we want to work. You're directing, you're acting, you're doing a ton of things. We're doing our podcast. Daphne's doing a bajillion different things. I can't.
Yeah.
even
We
all
keep-
are.
I
Yeah.
can't. But I mean, you're like really. You're
Where
like
am I
you're
again?
you're a whole new thing. What am I recording right now? It's almost like we want. That's the amazing thing about Mom Brain. We don't have to make sense. But
I'm just like, tell me where to show up and I'll just do the thing.
Just
you know what I mean?
randomly
At a
talk.
certain point, you're just like, tell me where to go. Oh, we're talking about this? Great.
Great.
You
Let's do
do.
it.
You feel like a wind-up doll. You're like, and go. And
Yeah, you just do the thing. The problem is you have to not crash, which is what I'm always trying to avoid. But I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. I mean, it's just a thing where we are trying to be like the super kumbaya, and at the same time, we're like, super,
Yeah.
go get my family lives in Spain. And my brother is like, he's like, what? I have my siesta, I have my
Right,
wine, I have
exactly.
my family. What else do I want? He's like, where are you running all the time? Why are
Right.
you hustling all the time? What are you trying to find? And I'm like, there's moments I'm like, that's a really, really good.
No, but it's true. And it's about, for me, it's been about finding those moments where I can embrace something exactly like that.
Satisfaction.
Where you just, and my partner as well, like we try to find those times and those moments to just be and be present and enjoy each other. Because that's the other thing too, is so many people, once they have children, It's funny because when I was first pregnant, people would be like, "Oh, you ready to settle down?" And what's so funny is since I've had my daughter and since my husband and I got together, my life is the complete opposite of settling down. It's completely, I mean, yes, we're busy and doing a bunch of different things just like we all are, but there's no settling down at all. It's the complete opposite. And it's so incredible and it's hard and it's challenging. And I've never created more in my life that's been the most fulfilling.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, because I feel like after you do have children, I've actually become more focused, even though you have like mom brain and you forget stuff and you're distracted and whatever. But in terms of my work and my focus, my priorities are so clear now because once you become a mother, in my opinion, it's like, okay, great. My family, nothing, like it's my children, my husband, that's my priority, And then after that, everything then it's work or home or whatever. But it's all like so focused for me now that really helps me a lot, like get a lot of stuff done because my priorities, I don't like entertain anything unless it is number one, it's good for my family and we agree with it as a family. And then I just don't kind of, maybe, let me look at that. I'm just like, no, can't do that. That's not good for my family. That's not good. That's totally distracting. I'm not doing that. You know what I mean?
If it's going to take you away from time that you could be with your family, it has to be something that's ultimately extremely fulfilling, exciting for you, something new for you. But it's also interesting because I felt like when I'm pregnant and as a mom, so two things happen. When I'm pregnant, I feel super creative. I feel like
for sure
the process of growing something and just being like available to that. I don't know. I feel like you pull things from the universe. You're just
for
like
sure.
I'll like wake up in the middle of the night with this idea. And I know it could be totally insane.
It's usually 2:00 in the morning. You're ordering like last crib sheets.
And I have a fabulous idea.
Major
what my friend just got me? She got me just on this. Do not forget what you were going to say.
I won't.
Because that happens to me all the time. Because I also have trouble sleeping. So when I wake up, I'm like, I have an idea. And I pull out my phone and then I'm just like awake.
It wakes you up.
So my friend for my birthday got me this notepad with this pilot pen that lights up at the end.
Oh, wait, that's genius.
Yeah, and she's like, "This is for your bedtime ideas." So anyway, but
in the morning, are they brilliant, or you're like, "What was I thinking?"
You know what's funny is sometimes because I really do pride myself on having a good memory. There are times when I'm like, "Oh, that's such a good idea. I'll remember that," and I don't.
No,
I don't even. And then sometimes I read it and I'm like, "Yeah, that was an awesome idea." Then other times I'm like, scratching that off the list. But so you wake up in the middle of the night, you have these ideas.
So I feel like in pregnancy, I'm very creative. In motherhood, much of what you do is Groundhog Day. It's very repetitive. And I think because of that, you are confronted with the same problems over and over and over again. So I become very solution oriented. And that's when I have like the creativity that I had when I was pregnant comes together into really interesting sort of like, oh, this is how we could solve this problem, or this is the product that we need, or like whatever it could be, which I think is really cool. However, I also feel like, you're having one child, having 5 kids, having 12 kids, like they all take up 24 hours of your day. They would happily take them. So learning new things or trying new things, it can be really hard to carve time for that. And I'm fascinated to hear that like what was 6 weeks you said after you had a baby, or 4 months after you had a baby, you were back and directing, which is obviously like, you spent since you were 18 or you started acting when you were 18. So you've been in this world forever and ever, but the skill set of acting is different than the skill set of directing. So what was that experience like, especially also contending with becoming a new mother and going through that process?
Well, there was one thing you just touched on that reminded me of something that I just want to touch on first, which is, I find one thing that went out the window for me was a lot of, self-care. Mm-hmm. And then one thing I've really been trying to do is making sure that, as a mother, it's like, obviously all your attention is on your kids. And then I always try to make sure my husband knows he's not like at the bottom of the totem pole.
Which is hard.
A lot of families, I feel like the partner feels like that. How it's little things like just always
blowjobs
working for sure. That absolutely, for sure. But there's things like little things like, as example, and I'm not saying this to be like patting myself on the back whatsoever. These are just things that are important and whatever. So he just lost a ton of weight for this movie he's currently doing that Barry Levinson's directing, and he's playing a real life boxer. So he had to start out losing a ton of weight, and then now he's in the phase of gaining weight because they show him at very different parts of his life.
Crazy.
So production stopped, and now he's in the gaining phase. So he needs to be eating a lot of food and whatever. So, as example, just little things of like, we always do date nights. We always try to make at least, 2 date nights is difficult, but 1 a week is very, very important to us. So we'll get someone to watch our daughter, and then we'll go, even if it's to a restaurant, even if it's for a couple hours, we go do that, or we go see a play or whatever. And then as example, yesterday morning, I, made him breakfast, and I always put it on a little tray with like a little flower and just like little creative things like
thoughtful.
that.
It's a small
It's
thing.
really
Yes.
thoughtful. And no, I'm not saying like whatever. I'm just saying like little things like that go a long way. Like not taking your partner for granted. And I know that he's bulking, and right when he had to wake up, he has to eat. So I had all of his stuff on a little tray next to the bed with a little like flower on and whatever, because we take turns taking the morning shift with our daughter. So I took the morning shift, and then I brought him breakfast. And then, I haven't really been sleeping that much lately. So a perfect example is, last night, this is your listeners are going to be like, what is up? Last night he came home with 2 dozen roses. And I'm like, what are you doing? He went out for a run, and he literally came home, and I was doing bath time with our daughter, but he has to keep working out because he's bulking for this role. So he went and worked out and came home, and he brought 2 dozen roses home for me. And I'm just like, what is this? As I'm like,
But that's the best time when it's for nothing.
Exactly. It's for nothing.
It's not like it's Valentine's Day and he's like, oh my God, I have to do it.
No, he brought home 2 dozen roses, and they were
best.
sitting in the bedroom when I came out of the bathroom with our daughter because I had just given her a bath. And then last night I've been having trouble sleeping. So he made me a little cup of CalMag, which is like the calcium magnesium powder. And he gave me a foot massage so I can go to sleep.
The best.
But the thing
one
is,
begets the other. Like
yes.
you being considerate of him. And it's funny, actually, there have been like only a few times where my husband has said to me, like, I need you to think about me in this way, or like I need this from you, or I need whatever, because I do try, and we all fall short sometimes.
Of course. This is funny because this has happened to be the last like 24 hours, but like you know what I mean.
And it's important that like if you feel you need that, or you feel like you're not getting it, it's so important to say that.
And there's no shame.
You have to.
And there's no shame in it because
Your
it's
partners.
so interesting.
You
You'll
have
see
to.
a lot of like mom memes and stuff like that are like, oh, my husband, he needs to do this, or oh, my husband, and a lot of like husband bashing. And yes, it is somebody else who wants to be taken care of, and sometimes that can feel really exhausting. But like, this is the person that you made your little people with, and you guys are like, what do you call it? The CEOs. Well, you guys are the CEOs.
We're the foundation
You're
of the family also.
And then so you guys got to keep your really good link, because then after 18 years, when your kid is out of the house, all of a sudden you look at each other and you're like, done.
I just had this conversation actually with my OB, funny enough, but she's also a great friend because she's amazing. And we were having this conversation about empty nesters. Mm-hmm. And she was basically saying that she's like, whenever my patients have children, a few months later, I'm always like, okay, great about the baby.
Yes.
How are you guys doing?
Yeah,
are you guys connecting? Because she said a lot of my patients who their children grow up and then move out of the house, they have nothing in common with their partner anymore. And she said it's so important to keep that foundation strong. And that's something that I feel like my husband and I really try to. And look, we're both work crazy schedules, just like you guys do, just like your partners do. And it is just about making that time for each other, because the more connected he and I are, then the better parents we are, the better we are at work, the better we are at everything. Because whenever we're disconnected, nothing is as good. You know what I mean?
But it also reminds me that it's, like you said, it's little things like that. But those little things create it's almost like your brain gets primed in this way that way of thinking about each other becomes normal. And then it just flows from there. It's like I talk to girlfriends who, for whatever reason, they felt like they've fallen out of connection with their partners.
Sure.
Or and this can be in relationship with anyone. This can be your girlfriends, your
Right.
mom, your whatever. And you know, one little thing, like you fall down on the job in one thing, and then it becomes easy to fall down again and easy to fall down again, and you feel disconnected more and more. And then the problem goes from, you know, anthill to mountain.
Right.
And I think it's really nice to hear those little specific examples of ways that like don't cost you a lot in time or energy or effort.
No, you could, Daphne, you could also like, you know, one thing too is, and this costs no money, like when your partner is going out of town for a trip or whatever, literally just write a little note and just stuff it in their suitcase.
They are like kids.
Or
they
stuff
like
a picture.
Who doesn't love to like open their lunchbox and get a note?
We do notes. We do notes all the time.
Notes are wonderful.
You know, we get emails into Mom Brain, and there was one that I answered recently for our stories, and it's this woman who breastfeeds and co-sleeps, and the husband is like super happy about that, but now the husband is starting to say, I think that you are spoiling the baby because the baby is basically living on the boob. I co-sleep with my little babies when they're babies, and then once they're about a year, I transition them permanently to their bed. So right now I have Romeo, my youngest, in bed with me, and they all do it. They just like sleep on the boob. And so she was asking, she's like, how do you think I'm spoiling my kid? And my husband is saying this. And what I said is, I think your husband is actually feeling neglected.
Right.
And so you have to get to that point of how you feel comfortable in your relationship, showing him that you still care and showing him that he's really important and that, you know, you want to have this experience while you breastfeed. It's a short period of time in the grand scheme of things.
Right.
I believe that there is a really big difference between spoiling and love.
Right.
I think that you can never give too much love. And spoiling is, you know, when I bring my kids to Barnes & Noble and they want to, not the books, the toy section, they want to buy all of the toys. And if I say yes, I feel like that's spoiling my kids.
Sure.
You know, or if they hit each other and I am not disciplining them or whatever it is.
Right.
This comes if you decide to have more. It gets really wild. But, you know, I mean, what would you say to that, you know, that example of this woman who is breastfeeding, co-sleeping, and then the husband is starting to get frustrated?
Well, I have friends who have, like, I didn't co-sleep with my daughter, but I have friends who co-sleep with their kids and also who work really long hours. And when they come home, they're like, that's my time to be with my kids.
Right.
And I totally get it. And there's no one way to mother at all. Like, a mother's intuition is 100% so strong, as you guys know, and all kids are different and there's no one way. But, you know, it's two things. One is I have a lot of guy friends. I mean, I grew up hanging out with mostly men, mostly guys. And a lot of my friends that have kids are like, you know, the co-sleeping, they feel like my wife doesn't want to have sex with me anymore.
Yeah.
So my thing is, you know, the co-sleeping thing is amazing and beautiful and incredible. But yeah, you know, you also just have to, just like with anything we were talking about, co-sleeping or not, or going on date nights or not, or giving your partner a blowjob or not, or whatever you want to do. You just have to keep that creation going. Like, you know, whatever it is. Like, and if there's co-sleeping and he's getting frustrated, okay, cool. Then my personal opinion, if this was a friend of mine being like, what do I do? I'd be like, just talk to your husband and be like, this is really important to me. I like feeling close to, you know, my child. Let's make extra time for you and I to be intimate and be together. That's what I would say. But
I think what you're getting to too is it's a joint decision. Like you can't, like I think it's hard because I think, I think mothers and fathers connect with babies in different way. There are different things that feel significant. There are different ways that you feel like you are getting that parental just feedback, which we all need. But I get it because I think a lot of, you know, it feels like something that if you want to co-sleep, that it should be that it feels like an obvious choice for some mothers. I only did for a period of time, and then I was ultimately like, I need my sleep. I want my bed back. And that was a choice that I made for my own happiness and for our family's happiness, and that my husband and I made together for our happiness. Right. And I think that's the one thing that it sounds like sometimes husbands, like the one in the sort of question we're talking about, are calling out for or crying out for, just like, consider me in this conversation, which I think is important. And a lot of moms can be like, well, don't worry about you. You're a grown up. Like, we'll get to you later. We're dealing with baby.
But it's critical.
It is important.
Yeah.
But I think it's funny because, the intimacy deal is so critical and important. The connection that with your partner is so critical and important. But also you started off talking, Laura, about me time, which is something that we love to talk about here. because it, again, speaking of things that end up falling very low on the totem pole once everything gets reprioritized and reorganized. But I maintain and feel so strongly that happy kids have happy parents to show them how it's done, that you will only ever be able to give 100% of yourself if you are filled up. If you're like an empty, water bottle with nothing left to give, that's not good for anybody. And so I'm curious, you had such great, like, easy to do tips for how to take care of your spouse and invest in a relationship. What do you do to take care of yourself, given that you are insane? Like, the schedule that you keep is out of control.
No, it's funny because my directing mentor was, she's now, she and her wife have a child, and she's just like, I feel like, you kind of run your house like a director. Like, you just kind of like do all the, whatever. And it's true. It just, just makes you more focused. But for me, as example, before I had my daughter, I would always take dance lessons. I take tango and I take salsa because I went down to Argentina.
But I've always wanted to do that. Tell me everything about it.
I love it.
What's
so funny? No way! Yeah. Oh my God, I love it. So and what's funny is when my husband and I first got together, he would take classes with me to like court me, and then once we got married, he's like, okay, look,
is he a good dancer?
My bag.
Is he a good dancer?
Yeah, he's amazing, but it's just not. He only does stuff if it's for a role. You know what I mean? Like now he's obsessed with boxing because he's playing a boxer. You know,
and the role was to be your husband.
Exactly.
Got it. Check that off the list.
It's like, all right,
here are my dance shoes.
Yeah, exactly. No, but I grew up dancing and I love it. And I went down to Argentina and I'd always taken like salsa lessons and stuff like that. And I grew up doing ballet and things like that. But when I went down to Argentina and I went to this milonga, which is basically like a social dance. And I had never been to Argentina before and I didn't know where I was being brought to. My friend was like, oh, let's go to a milonga. I'm like, great. So I'm like, I don't know what that is, but this is cool. So we go to this like abandoned like warehouse with this band on the stage and this big, gorgeous chandelier with no lights on it. The lights that are on it are the big fat Christmas bulb. Like I'm from Jersey. We use like the fat colored Christmas bulbs, right? And these colored Christmas bulbs are just hanging all over the chandelier. There's a band on stage and there's a circle of multiple couples all the way around the warehouse moving in this very slow circle, but each couple is doing these little intricate, beautiful things. And I said to my friend, I'm like, what is that? And she's like, oh, that's the Argentine tango. And I'm like, that's tango? Because you think of like the end of True Lies with like Arnold Schwarzenegger and like Jamie Lee Curtis, like the rose in her mouth, like stomping across the thing. And it's
such a good movie.
It's such a good movie. I love the movie. But it's not that. It's like Argentine tango is very beautiful and
contained. Intimate. It's very intimate.
It's very intimate. And I was like, I need to learn that. So I came home. I started taking Spanish lessons and because the way that they speak Spanish in Argentina, it has this beautiful Italian flair. And I loved it. And I lived in Italy as a child, so I immediately just felt so at home. And I started taking Argentine tango lessons, and I just became obsessed with it. So, as example, yesterday I went and I do a tango lesson. And then I go into a salsa lesson, and it's just something that I do for myself. And it's just important to me. I also feel like, growing up, I played the piano, and I feel like dancing and musicality and knowing rhythm and all these things, it feeds into my directing, it feeds into my writing, it feeds into my acting. So it all kind of feeds each other. You know what I mean? So when I'm writing, like right now I'm writing a project and I'm just like staring at a computer all day and it's really hard, meaning like my vision is starting to get like kind of strange from staring at a screen. And then, so I'll go out, I'll look out, I walk, and I also include it as my cardio. I walk half an hour to my dance studio. I do 2 back-to-back classes. I do tango and salsa, and then I walk half an hour back home. And that's like my cardio. I get to be creative. I get to work on my rhythm. I get to dance. Air. I get to breathe fresh air. And it just is really good for my mental state. So that's self-care that I do.
I love that.
For myself.
How do you work from home?
It's hard because I live in a New York apartment. So it's actually really I love that. What's tough is living in a New York apartment. My bedroom is my office. It's where I sleep. It's my gym. It's hard. You know what I mean? Having all that in one space is not easy. We're looking to expand into a bigger space because my husband and I both, when we're writing, we do work a lot from home unless we're on set. The one thing I do love about it is I always love having an office in my living space, but it needs to be separate from where my daughter is. But when I'm sitting at my computer writing for, as example, like 3 to 4 hours, or if I'm directing and I'm prepping, I get this feeling where like I need to hold my kid. You know what I mean? Like I need to be with my kids. So the fact that I can, walk outside and my daughter is, outside so I can work, I can go see her. And then I hug her, I spend some time with her, we read a book and hang out. And then, whoever I have watching her at that time takes over and then I can go back to work. I've tried, one thing is, speaking of the self-care thing, whenever I've learned that I cannot, when I'm being a full-time mother, I cannot work because it stresses me out so much. When I try to like put my writing in her nap times, it's so stressful.
No, it's really pressurized.
Oh my gosh. It's awful because then you're like, okay, I have an hour and 20 minutes to write. And then once you get in the groove,
and it better be good.
And then you have to get all the food ready and you're like, oh my God, wait, it's going to take me 20 minutes to get her food or, or whatever it is. You know what I mean? A lot of times I prep her food in advance, but it's still, that's 10 minutes of your writing time. You know what I mean? Like it's a whole thing. So for self-care, it's like I do things like the dancing things. When it comes to work, it's good for me to be working where I could go out and hug my daughter. It is hard when I hear her playing in the other room because I want to be with her. So sometimes I have to put in earplugs. The other thing I have to do is there are times where that feeling in your cells that pulls you to your kid. Like there are times where I have to leave my apartment because that feeling just won't go away. It never goes away, but you do need to leave sometimes.
And it's just, it can be distracting, especially when you work in a creative way. It's not like I just have to get down and be productive. Like sometimes it flows really naturally and effortlessly, and sometimes it takes forever.
Right.
And I feel like when I'm in my house trying to write or trying to get something done, and I hear my kids, it pulls me away because I'm like,
sure. Yeah.
But also they have like some crazy spidey sense, and they know I'm there, and they're like little animals like crawling at the door.
They're also more mobile, and they can open the door and just come in.
With a 5-year-old, there's no lock she can't get through. There is no,
or the fingers under the door. That one's always my favorite. There's this photo of all my children like peeking under the bathroom door as I'm literally peeing for 30 seconds, and then my friend was there and he took the photo, and he was
great.
He was like, this is your
you
life.
have to frame that. That's like a moment where like you need to put that.
4 children.
You know what I mean? That's so
they're
cute.
peeking. They're like, Mommy, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm peeing.
That's so
like, let me see.
cute.
I'm like, you do this.
You know what I want to. You know what I want to
That's
talk
so
about, which is
cute.
something that you brought up before, is a little bit, and then we were talking about right before you came here. Is hiding your pregnancy versus announcing it right away versus it's so interesting because now that I've had 4, especially the first time around, I was like, I'm hiding it until I know. And then of course, like, in our world, it's a little bit different where like people are guessing. You know what I mean? And then there's like people, exactly. So
people guess for everyone. I do feel like though. I feel like everyone's got that mother-in-law who's like,
yeah, exactly, yeah, yeah. But I mean, showing up to work, and especially if you are not feeling 100%, or just going to the grocery store, or hang out with your mother-in-law or whatever. Why do you think? I always struggle with myself. I'm always like, if I have another kid, I'm just going to tell people right away, because I would tell them if I lost the baby. I would tell, in the end, I'd be like, I just want you guys to know that.
Well, that's one way to go about it, yeah.
Or is it this thing, this is private time, but then is the stress of having to hide it, is it worth it? It's something that I struggle a lot with, of why are we so secretive? Is it a personal thing where we're taking care of ourselves? Or is it a shame thing of, oh God, what happens if I lose it? And what are people going to think of me? Did I do something wrong? I mean, it's such a complicated issue. And as people are starting to be more and more and more open on social media and everywhere and wanting to share their deepest, darkest secrets, should they but what do you think about people just saying things right away? Or is this that time to be quiet and stay within and keeping it to you and your family?
Yeah, well, you just brought up a really interesting point that I think all of us have to negotiate, which is the social media factor, which is when I first got into this business that I'm so blessed to be in. I mean, I love my job. But when we first started this over 20 years ago, there was no social media.
Right.
There was no, when you sign up for this particular job that there's going to be, you're going to lose a certain amount of anonymity. So you get that you're going to be in the public eye or whatever. So when you go to specific events or whatever, or every once in a while, you're like, okay, a paparazzi will catch me on the street or whatever. But now, but you could negotiate that. Now everybody is a paparazzi.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody with a camera phone, everybody with an iPhone or whatever, they're all paparazzi. So that's something new to negotiate. So I love my fans on social media, the followers on social media. Like, social media is an incredible platform that's helped so many people. I also see a lot of people struggle with it because everything is so public now. But it is an incredible way that I personally use to communicate with fans and share with them, and it's wonderful. But there's also the part of, as example, when you are pregnant, when I was first pregnant, I was at Sundance and we weren't telling anybody, and I was wearing a big puffy coat or whatever. You couldn't tell. And I left a restaurant and I turned and pointed at something, and you couldn't even tell I was pregnant. And my jacket happened to open and I just had dinner. And I was like a little, whatever. And
Pasta.
Literally it was like, oh, she's pregnant. And here's the other thing. I was at a party and I wasn't drinking. So because I wasn't drinking, I'm like, what the hell? Am I drinking at every party I'm ever at? Like, just
get a ginger
maybe
ale.
I was on a diet.
You get a ginger ale and you put it in a wine glass. And
Okay,
people,
trust.
I know all the
that was a learning lesson for me. Now I know the
Club
tricks.
soda
Trust.
Yes,
with orange,
or just carry
because it's a big full. People are like, oh, that looks like a vodka.
Exactly.
That
You get a
looks like
low ball glass with club soda and throw a lime in it.
Yeah.
That's what I do now.
tequila.
For sure. I'm like, whatever. And what's funny is I didn't even have time to drink at the party because it was a working party.
Right.
And I literally
Plus, maybe
didn't
you
have time
shouldn't
to
drink
stop
at every
and get
party,
a drink.
you know?
And maybe I'm not, maybe I don't drink
Maybe
at every
just-
single thing I
exactly.
go to. So I was like, really? And so there were little like, spies or whatever. But you bring up a really good point because I was not ready to talk about being pregnant yet. It was my first time being pregnant. I was very nervous about, what would happen. We weren't into the second trimester yet, where you're usually in the clear. And it's interesting. My partner and I are private people. Negotiating the social media of it all is something that I feel like I have a pretty good handle on right now. But we are very private. So it's tough. I mean, some people are very out in the open with everything. That's not how I am. I love sharing with people who've supported me over the years.
Right.
So that's why I like to share information. But my husband and I, when it has to do with our family, we always talk about it first. We always talk. If it's like my own personal stuff, that's different. But when it has to do with us or our daughter, we always have a conversation about it before it goes up on social media.
Right, as you should.
There's other times where he and I are out with our daughter and we know like there's plenty of times paparazzi have taken pictures of us and that's out of our hands. I just feel like now there's just a lot more to discuss because everything is so open.
Right.
And because you don't really have control. You step out the door and anyone with a camera can post a picture of you. So it's like, now I feel like there always has to be a conversation with your partner or whoever's helping you with your baby or your children or whatever. There always has to be a conversation of how private should we be, how in the open should we be, because it's going to get out there.
Right.
So, it is having those conversations we talked about earlier where it's like, do I try to put a picture out there first and control it? Do I try to not? It's a constant negotiation. And I think that everybody's different. Ben and I are a lot more private than a lot of our friends are.
I wonder why it's so fun for people to like spot the pregnancy. Like, why is that like sleuthing such a
But
a
I
fun
think
thing?
even for people who are not dealing with paparazzi and, like you being famous, no one, there's still like the people who go to work. I know some of my friends, they're like, I'm pregnant. I'm in my first trimester and I keep on going to pee and everybody's looking at me as I come back to my cubicle. And it's just whatever your role is in the world, those first 3 months are really tricky. And then to kind of have to be like, I'm fine, or
well,
I
I
just
also
have the
think
flu,
it's like
or whatever it is.
we're perceptive people. It's like whatever you believe. It's like energy. If you walk into a room in a really shitty mood, people around you are going to be like, get a little shittier. If you come in and you're like really upbeat, people are going to be like, right on, good morning. So if you're like going around like, oh shit, does everybody know that I'm pregnant? You're going to send out some radar. You know what I mean?
The moral is, no matter how shitty you feel, go in with a smile and make sure you're not too green.
Exactly. There is a little bit of that of like, if you're super nervous about, people pick up on that stuff.
Totally.
They just do, they just know.
So speaking of things that you share about, willingly, happily, you just launched your YouTube channel, or not just, but recently, which I love, and I love watching your videos, and I think
Thank you.
I do, and I think it's so fun. I love to hear you talk about food, because even though everyone knows you for your professional career in, the 70s show and Orange is the New Black and everything, it feels like food to me is this passion of yours that I've only recently come to like know and appreciate.
Yeah.
And then we always get to talking about your mom, who's just like such a freaking rock star, cool chef. Laura tells a story about like your mom was an actual chef, and she would come out at like 2 a.m. and her mom would have 10 different versions of Peking duck like strung up from the ceiling fan and like drying them out to the perfect crispy skin texture. Talk about food. You talked about preparing food for your daughter. Talk about food in your family, like the history of that, or if you want to share some fun recipes of how you get your daughter to eat delicious, healthy, good food for her that's not like out of a box. Give us all some good tips.
No, I mean, by the way, your chicken finger recipe rocks.
Yay!
She shared a recipe with me. My daughter loves it. We grew up in the kitchen. I'm the youngest of 5 kids, from Jersey, and my mother was she was a at-home gourmet chef. So she would do crazy things like the Peking duck and go to all,
with the fans going.
Yeah, with like a fan on. I mean, she is a total character, and she's incredible. But yeah, no, she would drive like, an hour away to a fish market to be like, shouldering in with like other sushi chefs, like picking out her toro, and, and then she went on like a sushi, like she always just, frog, like all this crazy stuff she loved, because she would go to all these restaurants in New York and then come home and make the recipes herself. And then our father was, he's passed now, but he was an orthopedic surgeon, so he was always in the hospital. So, and he had the most amount of cases in 2 hospitals, which was like unheard of. But he lived to work.
Wow.
And he loved it. So he was this wonderful surgeon, and then my mother would cook. So that was like our upbringing. So I was the one who was always really interested in what she was doing in the kitchen. So she taught me everything. I mean, honestly, when I was growing up, it was not like lessons about right and wrong. It was lessons about, using a roll top chafing dish instead of like a lift top, so there was no condensation in the food. It was stuff like that, or like, how to scramble the perfect egg or hard boil an egg without a gray yolk. And that's what I learned growing up. And I always had a huge passion for food, because that's where we would always be. We would always be in the kitchen. And then, I finally, I've always wanted to do a cookbook and a book about food. But because I had this crossover where I was always learning about the body and, kinesthetics and organs and how the body works, because I was going to be a doctor before I stumbled into acting. Thank God, because I love my job. But, my first book really was great because it bridged the gap between some really great science and food. And that was something that I'd been studying for years. And after my book came out,
The Stash Plan.
Yeah. So the book came out, New York Times bestseller. So thank you to your listeners for, being so supportive of that. And I love that book a lot.
And it's great for people who want to cook in advance also. Like it was all this like bulk batch cooking.
Yes.
Taking great sort of gourmet culinary skills that you'd grown up and learned and simplifying, which is a lot of what you do on your YouTube channel.
Well, because that's what I do. I mean, that's what, we've always been very conscious of food, like real whole food. My mother taught me that at a young age. She taught me the importance of eating organic. She taught me about just having like real whole fresh food that your body can assimilate and knows what it is. And she taught me how to batch cook when I was about 12 years old. Because when I was 15, I was out on my own. When I was 15, I moved to a foreign country by myself. So
I feel like we need 12 podcasts to
know,
go through
right?
like each
that was like a
of
big,
your.
That was a big drop.
You've lived like 12 lives.
No,
and you're
it's
only
crazy.
22. I
No,
don't understand
I'm
how
only
you did it.
No, I literally I moved there by myself at 15. I lived in Italy for a year. Then I lived in Paris and London, and I had no money. My mom helped me, but I remember calling her in the middle of the night. I was living in this really crappy apartment because I didn't have any money, and she said, and I was like, "Mommy, there's cockroaches everywhere." And I called her from
What
the
do I
apartment.
feed them?
I'm like, what do they like to eat? No, I was just like, what do I do? And she said, when you go to the bathroom, she's like, look away and turn the lights on because they'll scatter. Then I'm like, light. Because when she was growing up, she grew up in very tough circumstances. And she was like, and so this is just a tip from her. She's like, they don't like light. So turn on the light. And so I would sleep with all the lights on. And, oh my gosh, it was crazy. But because I was on my own, I would batch cook all the time, and then I would like live off of that for a few days. So this is just something that I learned to do to be in control of my food and my diet and know what I'm eating from a very young age. So it only made sense that my first book was basically about batch cooking. Now, as a mother, a working mother, I've taken that to a whole new level because the subject of preparation, whether it's my prep as a director, my prep as an actor, my prep as a mother, my prep getting my kid ready for the day, prep helping my husband prep his day, whatever it is, whether it's, batch cooking or whatever it is, like preparation is a massive part of how I can maintain my life. Mm-hmm. So my YouTube channel really was kind of born out of, after the stash plan, people had all these questions, these great questions about, now that you're a mother, how do you still do this? How do you still have a healthy lifestyle? How do you, all these things. I decided to do a YouTube channel to answer all those questions in a way that I could really, it wasn't just like a quick little post. It was like, I can do a 5-minute video, a 10-minute video. I could really show you, like I'm a huge proponent of bone broth. And the nutrients for all of it, the collagen, the cartilage, everything. I just love bone broth. Speaking of lying in and all that stuff, these women would have bone broths, So I'm a huge proponent of cooking with bone broth. But I could never, with the stash plan, it's in there. But I couldn't, and I did like a segment on Live with Kelly and Ryan about the bone broth, but it's so short. You don't really have time to explain
the details.
Why. So perfect example, on YouTube, I did a video about how I make my bone broth. And I showed how I put it in the thing, like my chicken broth as example. I showed how I prepared it. I showed how after it cooks for, 3 to 4 hours, I pull all the meat off. I showed the next day how I strain it. Mm-hmm. And then I showed a bunch of recipes that I make with that chicken and with the broth. So that's something that is a longer video that I was able to share with my, people who follow me on social media or subscribe to the YouTube channel. I was able to share that with them. And it's a bunch of different things. It's a lot of it is recipes just because I love that. And my first book was, mostly about food. And it's something that I'm just really passionate about. But I also want to do a video where I talk about how I prepare as a director. One of the most popular videos is me talking about how I, got into acting and prepare as an actor and stuff like that.
Can you do one of you in tango class next time? I would watch that. I would watch it like 100 times.
Have you ever been to SOBs?
No, what is that?
Okay, you
SOBs?
need to go.
What is that?
SOBs. It's like just south of Houston on maybe I know Cal.
Cal's giving us like 50 signals.
He's like,
don't let her leave.
Bye.
No, we won't. We won't.
It's okay. I'm gonna find out. It's on Barrack Street, like just south of Houston, like around there.
Okay.
It's a salsa club with like live music
great.
and everything.
I love that.
To go.
That's great.
There in Favela Cubana on like a Tuesday night, it's like this little restaurant, and then they take out all the.
I know a place in LA that called oh gosh, what is it called? It's in LA on Vine. I can't remember, but it was a restaurant. They would have a dance floor and a live salsa band. It was great.
So fun.
I haven't found the ones in New York yet, but it's just so much fun.
SOBs and Favela Cubana. There's a bunch of them, but those are really some really fun ones.
Laura Prepon, we love you so much.
Thank you
for coming.
Cal is
Cal is literally like smoke signals, like, all right, she has to leave.
He's going to just like turn everything off.
But promise you'll come back.
Thank you guys for having me
so much.
Yes, you too. Thank you.